My name is Bo Hodiak. I'm a retired journalist, now living in Florida. The name of the series, this will be 4 separate videos, is Who and What Created Trump. Part 1 I call The Reagan Revolution. In 1966, I was a reporter in the Los Angeles bureau of the Associated Press, and I was sent to a few of the campaigns that Ronald Reagan was having, running for governor of California on the Republican ticket. I remember standing quite close a couple of times to Reagan, and I noticed that he had 1,000 tiny wrinkles on his face. It was kind of surprising. You never saw it on television. There was no high-definition television there. You didn't see it in the newspaper photographs, but it existed. I assumed it was because, as an actor, he had to look his best, and he spent a lot of time under the sun getting wonderful suntans. At any rate, a few years later, I saw a large photograph, color photograph of his face, and the wrinkles were gone. So I assumed that he had it taken care of. Anyway, I palled around with the Los Angeles Times reporters and the Los Angeles Herald Examiner reporters, paper that is no longer published, and we kind of wondered, how was it that, if you want to say it unkindly, an over-the-hill actor who recently starred with a chimpanzee in Bedtime for Bonzo, who is now traveling from General Electric to General Electric plant, giving pep talks to the employees, who was hosting the General Electric theater on television, and who had been a Democrat all his life. How did he get into this position? Now, Reagan, as a youth, admired Franklin Delano Roosevelt because his family of modest means had benefited tremendously from Roosevelt's New Deal program. But as he became successful in Hollywood, he changed his thinking, and 4 years previously, in 1962, he became a registered Republican. Still, why was he chosen? And we looked into it, and we found out, although we never wrote about it. In 1966, at the beginning of 1966, a group of very rich Republicans who had spent a ton of money supporting various Republican candidates decided to get together and have a meeting because they felt that they were diffusing their influence. They had supported different candidates, and the purpose of the meeting was to decide on one candidate for governor, put all their money behind him and all their influence. And so they started interviewing various people. And one of them was Reagan. Now, as everybody knows, Reagan was an attractive man. He had a nice, calm, solid demeanor about him. He was very much at ease in front of television cameras. So they chose him. A friend of one of the men at the meeting later told me that after Reagan left, after he was told that he was selected, this man said, let's put Reagan into some deals so he can make some money, so he can become one of us. Well, as everybody knows, in 1980, Reagan became president of the United States. He moved to Washington, and it was payback time. It has been called the Reagan Revolution, and it changed America. As I explain at the end of the video, that Reagan was a great man. Here I want to mention where Reagan had a major impact on America. I'll briefly cover taxes, deregulation, supply-side economics, deficits, unions, view of government, and finally, Star Wars. Let's begin with taxes. One of the first things Reagan did was cut taxes in half on the highest earners. He also reduced taxes on corporations.
Taxes have been a bane of Republicans for a long time. In 2012, an influential conservative, Grover Norquist, actually got 95% of Republican senators and congressmen to sign a pledge that they would not vote to increase taxes. Second, deregulation. There are thousands of government regulations, and most businesses and corporations and banks hate them. The Reagan administration eliminated or neutered as many as it could. Banks and savings and loan institutions were deregulated and loan restrictions were eased. Deregulation seemed to become a permanent platform of the Republican Party. President George W. Bush once famously said, "Leave Wall Street alone, it will do the right thing." Norquist also famously said he wished government could be made so small he could put it in a bathtub and drown it. Deregulation meant that bankers could now play casino with depositors' money, investing it in real estate ventures and other risky methods to make money. Naturally, the guarantor of all this was Uncle Sam, or rather Uncle Sap. It meant if the bankers made money in their investments, they kept the profits. If the bankers lost, Uncle Sam got the tab. Depositors' deposits were insured by the government. Near the end of Reagan's term in office, it all came crashing down, costing taxpayers $300 billion in today's money. And no lessons were learned, or regulations changed, at least sufficiently. Loose loan regulations meant in the early 2000s a waitress or a janitor could walk into a bank and come out with a $500,000 mortgage. It was called subprime lending, and it meant, hurrah, people who previously could never qualify for mortgage loans could now sail through. One waitress claimed she earned $12,000 a month, and nobody bothered to check. Subprime lending was hugely profitable, and the bankers made out like bandits, and they kept their loot. But a few years later, millions of people lost their homes. The CEO and founder of Countrywide, the biggest mortgage lender in the country, left the business with a fortune of $600 million. Third, supply-side economics. The Reagan administration embraced what is also known as trickle-down economics. The argument was, if you reduce taxes on the rich and the corporations, this would release money for them to create jobs, pay workers more, and expand production. The benefits would trickle down. We have 35 years of economic statistics on this, and unfortunately, there was no trickle down. Most of it stayed on top. Productivity did increase dramatically, and profits soared, but workers' wages stayed relatively stagnant. The beneficiaries were the stockholders and top management. Hard to believe, but since the 1960s, the compensation of the top CEOs in the biggest corporations increased by nearly 1,000%, a tenfold increase. That meant the top CEOs made 320 times more annually than their average workers. In Japan, the multiplier is around 35, not 320. Trump continued the trickle-down practice when, at the end of 2017, he signed a new tax bill reducing taxes on the wealthy and the corporations. Two economists recently published a book analyzing the effect of the 2017 reductions, saying 83% of the benefits went to the 1%. The tax cut also added $1.3 trillion to the national debt. The famous mutual fund manager Warren Buffett said that in one day, because of the tax restructuring Trump's signature created, he became richer by $29 billion. Unfortunately, that also meant the U.S. Treasury became $29 billion poorer. There are nearly 700 billionaires in America today, and no doubt most were pleased. When the tax cut was finally law, the Republican senators and Congresspeople breathed a sigh of relief. In a private meeting the senators held sometime before the vote, which was leaked to a reporter, Senator Lindsey Graham told the group, quote, if we don't get this tax cut through, the contributions will stop. Forbes magazine recently stated that 80 billionaires have contributed to Trump's 2020 campaign, with 14 donating $500,000 or more. Fourth, deficits. Old school Republicans and Democrats cared about balanced budgets, but not today. Former Vice President Dick Cheney famously said, deficits don't matter. Reagan left office with the national debt 3 times higher than when he entered. Well, when you're against higher taxes, the money has to come from somewhere. Why not put it on the national credit card? After all, the U.S. Treasury can print as many dollars as Congress wants. The problem is, other countries need to trust the value of the dollar. In a sense, the dollar is funny money, since it is not tied to anything real like gold. So its value depends on the trust people have in the dollar and the need they have for it to be an international currency. It is not unthinkable that some other currency might eventually replace the dollar on the world stage if the American economy keeps drowning in debt. Fifth, unions. Reagan taught the corporations and businesses that unions were vulnerable and could be defeated. His biggest win was with the air traffic controllers strike in 1981, which I covered as a reporter. The administration had been preparing for the strike and gave the strikers an ultimatum: back to work in 48 hours or you're fired. Most resisted, and more than 11,000 controllers were fired. The administration called in military controllers, had all the managers pitch in as controllers, while quickly training new ones, and Reagan prevailed. This was a bit ironic, for in 1960, when Reagan was president of the Screen Actors Union, SAG, S-A-G, he led a successful strike against movie producers to get movie residual payments for actors. At that time, 40% of private enterprises were unionized. Today, 6% are. It meant that workers lost bargaining power, quite a difference in Germany, Japan, and other countries where workers traditionally have a say in management and a seat on the board of directors. This means if productivity and profits go up, the workers also share. Sixth, respect for government. Reagan said, government is the problem, not the solution. He once quipped that the most frightening words a businessman could hear when 2 men show up in his office are, we are from the government and we are here to help. The corollary was, government should stay out of our affairs as much as possible. But all this said, I believe Reagan was a great man. Now, historians define a great man as someone who had a major influence on his country and on the world. Reagan qualifies primarily because of Star Wars. In the 1980s, the Cold War with the Soviet Union was still raging and there was an arms race. It meant each side competed to produce more and better weapons. It got to the point that between the USA and the USSR, enough nuclear missiles were stockpiled to destroy not only every city in the world, but most of the towns. Upping the ante, Reagan started talking about the Star Wars defense. Hundreds of satellites would be sent up into space that theoretically could shoot down any nuclear missiles that the USSR shot at the USA. Naturally, this would be incredibly expensive. But if the USA put the Star Wars satellites up, the USSR would need to put up theirs also. Now, the Soviet Union had a corrupt, hugely inefficient, struggling economy. The late Senator John McCain said it was a gas station with nuclear arms. The USSR got most of its foreign income by selling its natural resources: oil, gas, precious metals, minerals. Almost every useful consumer product was in short supply. I was a reporter in the late 1980s in Kiev, Ukraine, and I was unable to buy a light bulb for my desk lamp. One day a young man walked up to me and asked if he could buy my shoes. Surprised, I asked why, since there were shoe stores in Kiev. If I buy there, he said, the shoes will fall apart in a few weeks. So Mikhail Gorbachev, head of the USSR, knew changes had to be made. He started talking about perestroika, restructuring in English, and glasnost, transparency. He eased up on the command economy, where all decisions were made in Moscow. Bureaucrats, not the market, even decided how many pantyhose would be produced. So the Soviet people got a taste of some political reforms and some freedoms, and they wanted more. Gorbachev had opened the Pandora's box, and it swept him and the USSR into history. In my opinion, it was mostly Reagan's doing, and it is possible his Star Wars talk was just a ploy. You can see the process the Reagan administration introduced is alive with Trump. Don't raise taxes, deficits are okay, the less regulation the better, certainly a low respect for the government. The trickle economy is alive and strong. Money is king in Washington, or more accurately, dark money is calling the shots, to use the title of Jane Mayer's fine book. Not long ago, the Supreme Court allowed big campaign contributors and corporate CEOs to give money anonymously. You could call it passing the envelopes in the dark.
The second video is called Newt Gingrich and the Politics of Attrition. Gingrich taught politicians how to stop being gentlemen and how to do the infighting. He was all about winning. He didn't like losers. Does that resonate today? So that's the second video. The third one is Ayn Rand, because she taught people that the virtue of selfishness. Selfishness was a noble thing. And the fourth video would be Lewis Powell Jr. and the gaslighting of America. Now, gaslighting, among the meanings it has, is that you manipulate people, you give them information that benefits you, that kind of gets them to support your self-interests, not their interests. And I'll explain how effective this was in America. Well, to end the video, I was looking at the thumbnail with the photo of Trump, and I had a thought. Trump liked to give nicknames to his opponents, and I think of Trump as my opponent. So my nickname for him is Snake Eyes, because he looks reptilian and he's a predator. Please tell others if you find this interesting, and I hope that you will watch all the others, because I guarantee you that the second and the third and the fourth are more interesting than this one. So thank you for watching.